Welcome back. We are on week 3 now of the hobby vlog. Building this board, I have printed a load more stuff, but I've just started storing it in boxes for now because there's so much of it. This week I want to get started on looking at the wiring for the board and getting some paint down onto some of the pieces. With the painting, what I want to do is find like a template, like a style that I can use throughout the whole thing. So I'm going to paint a couple of pieces, hopefully in a technique that I can then carry across everything else. So let's have a look at the wiring first. Right, the first thing I did was go around and screw on all these pieces with these new smaller screws so they don't stick through the top. That was really important. I wanted to get that done. I have then soldered some points, soldered some wires onto the magnetic connectors between the boards. I'm going to work on these two boards first. The other two boards will be identical. I've then used these, they're not Wago clips, but they look like Wago clips. These are multi-clip connectors, so I can put all the blacks into there, all the reds into there, and that should just make it a lot easier rather than having to solder lots of wires together. I am using these USB-C power chips, and they just have a power out, power in on there, and I have 3D printed these little modules that they can slip into. And I did these because if we just have one of these flat on the board and then I'm trying to stick a wire into it, it's going to push against any glue that's on there. It just won't work very well. Whereas these raise it up off the board a little bit, and then it just gives us a little bit more space to play with when we're plugging wires in. These connectors, they're magnetic, they pull together, but there was still a little bit of give in them. So I've 3D printed these clips to go on there as well. Now, that might create issues further down the line in terms of stability of the board, because this middle bit will now be slightly higher than these, but if I need to, I'll just print some more of those and they can go on the corners, and then maybe on the middle bits as well if needed. See how we get on with it. It might not make too much difference. Right, so now that they are soldered in place, I should be able to plug these into, try not to trap my fingers as these snap. We should be able to go into both of these. So that should now provide power to that board. This one should be able to go into here. I'm sorry if you're just getting a view of the top of my head as I do this. Hopefully I'm not too far in the shot. And into here. So now I should be able to plug, say, an LED into, these have got really fine wires. Let's just solder some tips of these wires just to try and give it a bit more bulk for when it goes into the clip. I really should be wearing my mask to do this. I'm going to put on the extractor fan. There we go. Don't do this at home, kids. Wear a mask, use better ventilation. Right, now these tips have been soldered. The way these are done is the colour is the colour of the LED, and that goes into the positive connection, which is red on my board, and then the other one goes into the black. And I'm not sure how good quality the connections will be on these LEDs, we shall see. Hopefully I won't have to strip all the wires and everything. Should go there. So now, in theory, if they are both connected properly, I should be able to plug this power pack into either one of these USBs and it should power both LEDs. Okay, so it's not powering this one, but that could just be a dodgy connection. Yep, there we go. So there's a bit of a loose connection on the black wire there. So that one powers both of them. Then plug it in here. And it powers both of them. Voila! Okay, good. So that is a really good start with the electricity then, with the power, because that shows that other than a dodgy connection on this one, which I just need to, there we go, so you can see it flickers on, it's just a loose connection in there. I think it's, these wires are quite thin that come off them, so I just need to work on that. But that is a proof of concept. That shows that these connections work properly. If I take these off, it seems fairly solid, so I think I'll be able to use this. I might even be able to use it without these once it's done, but I'll keep those there for now. For some reason, I think there's not enough draw for this power pack, so this keeps turning off. So I need to have a look at that as well. So with the power kind of working, what I want to do is move on to the painting. And I have taken two of these pieces. So I've taken one of the corner pieces and one of the sewer corner pieces. So I want to do slightly different effects on both of them. I want to make both of these look cool this video, and that will give us a kind of platform to build on for the other ones. So I'm going to clear off the rest of the table, so we've got a nice space to work just painting these two. The first thing I need to do is to stick these down, and these have got a really useful way of doing this. There are holes in the bottom of these pieces and in here, and the idea is you just use old filament, stick it in, snip off the end, and then you can push it into there, and then you give it a bit of glue and that just holds it in place. So you can see it just pushes into these holes in the bottom and then into there. Add a little bit of super glue. And it should, once I've done all three, put a bit of super glue on the bottom just to help it connect. See how good these work. Go. Put that into place. And that, just with those bits, should just be a lot stronger and stop it sliding off. I like that. It's a good idea. Right, let's do some painting. Okay, looking at the pictures that they have done on the Stormcrow scenery My Mini Factory page, it looks, I really like the final look that they've gone with. Just grabbing some tissue paper, some kitchen roll, and it looks like it is just a very simple dry brush with grey and then either a white or a cream. So I'm going to experiment with that. I'm going to use this big makeup brush to try and get some of that kind of effect, and I'm just going to go with a big dry brush to begin with. Take off most of it, and I'll do the same for both the sewer piece and for the upper ground piece. And a lot of the differences are going to come out in the weathering, especially of this piece. Now, I don't want to give too much away for how I'm going to finish this off when I finally get it finished, but I need to figure out a way to do icicles under here. So if any of you guys have suggestions for how I could make really cool and easy icicles, I am all ears. So this is just a really heavy dry brush with this grey, just cheap craft paint. This is the graduate range. I think I got this from the range here in the UK. Wasn't expensive, but what I want here more than anything is quick and easy, because I've got so many pieces to do. I don't want something that's going to take ages and ages to kind of brush up, and that I've just done that as I've been talking. Now, somebody asked about layer lines, because I printed this at 0.24mm layers. Now, if you get really close, I don't know if it will pick it up on the camera, but if you get really close, yes, you will see some layer lines. but they are so faint. I think the trade-off between the layer lines and the speed of printing is worth it. Now, from 12-inch away, certainly from 3 feet away, you know, if you're playing with this terrain on a table, you can't see the layer lines. And by the time you've used a black primer, I use just a cheap rattle can primer, and we've put all these layers on, you're not going to be able to see it. You know, to go any finer, I think, on big terrain pieces would be pointless. It would just take so long to print that it just wouldn't be worth it, especially for this many pieces. If you were doing just a really small board with 5 or 6 pieces and you didn't mind waiting a week, then yeah, great, you might notice a little bit of benefit from it. But for me, for what I'm doing, for throwing this stuff around, it's just not worth that extra time. You know, I wouldn't go necessarily any larger layer lines than 0.24 because I just think that would start to become really noticeable. But even here on this kind of piece here, you know, even there on the camera, you can't really see them. And if I take it away to this kind of, there you go, to this kind of thing, it's just not there. You can't see them. So this is going to be interesting to get up in here, but it doesn't need to be too good in there because it is in shadow. So now in here, in these kind of places, there aren't LEDs at the moment, but I might take it upon myself to put some kind of creepy green glows in there, give it almost that Skaven underhive. And again, if I can figure out a way to do icicles, then having them hang down from places like this will look, I think, will look awesome. And having a big brush like this is just so much quicker than using your standard dry brush for big stuff like this, big terrain. And you could start to add browns in here if you wanted to as well. But once I've got my colour palette as I want it, and I'm happy with how it kind of comes out, then I can start spending, you know, in the evenings or something like that, I can just sit there watching TV and I can work through all of the pieces. Because it's going to take a while. It'll take me a few weeks, I think, to paint all of these up, but by dry brushing like that, it leaves the black depths. What I might do actually there is go back over it with some black 3.0 just for these bits under here to really give them that dark tunnel. And then there are these grating pieces as well that will fit, and I'll paint these separately, and they will fit like that. And I'll probably do those with rusted metal just to add a little bit of a pop of colour. Right, so they have had the grate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these probably for about half an hour to dry, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go over them with, I can't decide whether to go for ivory or white. I think I will probably go for white. I might go for a mix. I might just... The problem with mixing colours is then I've got to mix it every time I do the thing. I'd sooner just go for a standard colour. So we'll see. I'll have a play around. That's what this whole stage is about, and we'll see what happens. I might do part of it in ivory, part of it in white, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, we'll let it dry and then we'll come back. Right, I'm going to try with the cream first, and we'll see what this comes out like. I've not bothered to clean the brush. Doesn't matter if it's got a bit of grain. This one's going to be a little bit of a lighter dry brush than the last one. Don't want it to be quite as heavy. Give it that white look, and it might be that we do the white on top of this. That might be the way I'd go. I do want it to pop when it's on the board. I do want it to look like it did in the photos and the renders that they've done. Really, it looks like it's got kind of that white city look from Lord of the Rings. And I could go for different stones for these cobblestones to these ones. I could go for a slightly different colour there. But again, I'm wanting simple and I want it unified, I want it to tie together. So we will see. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to do this piece and then maybe I'll go over it with a light dusting of white and we'll see how we get on. Whilst we wait for that to dry, I'm going to paint up one of these braziers so that I can put that in and we'll see what it looks like with the light. So I'm going to use Dark Star Steel just because it's one of my favourite metal paints for this kind of dark steel, and I know it sticks to unprimed resin because I haven't primed it yet. So I'm just going to paint this all over and then I'm going to use some Dirty Down Rust just to kind of weather it in. When it comes to doing most of them, I might use a bit more techniques, but again, Dirty Down Rust is quick, it's easy, and it's predictable. I know not many people say that about rust, but Dirty Down Rust, but I actually find it quite predictable, especially if you water it down. As for a final layer on the top part, I'm not going to do this on the sewer, I'm going to leave that with the cream look on it, because I think when I add the weathering on that will look better, and I think it will look dingier. This one I'm just going to go for a really light white dry brush over the top, just to pick out the edges and give it that white city vibe, just to make it look brighter, and it will just make it pop a bit more on the board. Yeah, so this is when you start to see a little bit more of the layer lines in places like this, but again I stand by my point that I would sooner have the shorter print times, than have to worry too much about that, because I still think from a distance you won't notice it at all. Okay, the brazier is done. I'm going to drill a hole through the back of this slot. So this is where the 3-volt button battery would normally go, but obviously I'm not going to use batteries like I said, I am just going to use the power packs. I've got a little bit of a problem just for today because I ordered these 5mm LEDs, but I accidentally ordered the 9 to 12 volt ones, which obviously they work on the power bank, but they're quite dim. But I just want to see what it will look like today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole through the back so that this can be pushed through. I'm going to glue this onto here, and we'll be able to see what that looks like once we've done all the rest of the weathering and stuff like that on here. But this will be dimmer than the ones I'm going to go for, so I will eventually swap those out. So I just need somewhere roughly in the middle. With that done, and with this one done, we can start to have a look at some quick weathering techniques to see how we can just age this up a little bit. I don't want to just do a full oil wash. I want to be a little bit more controlled than that. So I'm going to do some moss work and I'm going to do some oil stuff. A lot of the big stuff, so like creeping vines and things like that, I'm going to leave until the board has been stuck down. What this will be is just the basic coat. I might even leave it at this. I think I'll put a little bit on just to bring it, just to see with these pieces. But I think with everything else, I'm going to leave it at this stage and build it up and then weather it. But I'm going to weather these just so I can see what it will look like finished. I think that's probably the best way to do it. So I've got that full template. Okay, this is pretty much dry, so I'm going to try and do some weathering on the stone, and I'm not sure which one to use out of Streaking Grime or Decrepit Filth by Villainy Inks. These are both enamel washes. What I think I'm going to do is use the Streaking Grime and pull it down from the ceiling, and I'm going to use the Decrepit Filth and go around the base and around here, and that will give me an idea of what both of them look like. Hopefully that'll work. I'm not going to do any of this on the outside piece yet. I might use the Streaking Grime and just pull that down a little bit. I'm not decided whether or not I might just do an oil wash on the top because they're a little bit bigger. But for now I'm going to play around with the bottom. So the first thing, use a streaking grime. These have all been shaken properly for a long time on the vortex mixer as well. So if streaking grime, put this on using this brush. So it is quite thick, but what I'm going to do after I've put it on is I'll go in with some white spirits and I will pull it down and wipe some of it off. This is a really old brush, probably a bit stiffer than I would like, but because there's also not as much sewer, underground, whatever we want to call this, as there is the stuff on the top. So I don't want to be using this stuff on the top because it is quite expensive. And if I start using it on all the top pieces, it will cost an absolute fortune. Right, this is white spirits, mineral spirits, and this is the odour-free stuff. It smells a lot, damn sight better than than the dirty grime. I'm just going to loosen it up with this. Try and put quite a bit on. And let it run naturally down if I can. And what that does is it just allows it to flow down the wall naturally and gives it quite a nice look. And until I varnish this, I should still be able to go in and move it about if I want to. So I'll put some around on the floor. But what I do want to do is also have a play with the villainy ink, the decrepit filth. So I'm just going to try and drop some of this out. And here, like I say, it's already been mixed properly. The villainy inks need a big mix. Let's try and. What will be interesting is we are already on Tuesday, and I want to get this video out tomorrow on Wednesday, so it'll be interesting to see how these dry. So this has a much more subtle kind of look. I also want to put some gunk going through here, so that will be interesting. Okay, so this is all dried now, more or less. There's still a little bit of ink, a little bit of the wet streaking grime going on there. But what I want to do is I just want to try and build up some gunk, 'cause it's a corner in the background. I've got these little bits. There's a skull and a little mushroom. I painted up the mushrooms for a moonstone base I was doing. So I've just given them a quick kind of splash over with some contrast, and then the skull is just skeleton horde contrast paint. So I'm going to stick those down onto the base, and then fill around it with some aquarium sand, just to kind of, well, this geezer looking up if we can. It might look a bit cheesy, but again, something that we can try in this one, and we can take out if we don't like them. What I'm going to do is use this aquarium sand that I bought for an aquarium, as you do. Not a lot. It's quite a nice grain size, I think, for just giving kind of a fallen rubble texture. Normally I would try and pipette some isopropyl onto this, but I'm just going to mist it. Don't need lots. And what that does is it breaks the surface tension so that this stuff can soak down to the bottom of it. If you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know all this anyway. But this should just give us a nice solid block of gravel that holds all that stuff in place. Right, whilst the scenic sealant dries, because I want to get this done in time for the video tomorrow, I am going to use this now, so hopefully it will dry overnight. Oh, that's a tough lid to open. Right, we're back. I had to use a clamp to get off in the end. Top tip, kids, clean your threads before you put your lids on. Right, so this is the AK Swamp Green Water Gel. And use this to kind of splodge in some sewer water. See how this dries. It doesn't dry like this. It dries a lot clearer and looks really cool when it dries. And again, when I join the tiles together, I'll carry this from one to the other. This is just to give us an idea of what it will look like. Now, I might get a little bit carried away and put just a little bit gathered around there. We'll see what that looks like when it's done. Might look rubbish, but we'll see. Right, that's starting to dry now quite nicely. So the last thing I want to do, really, just to kind of give this a little bit more of a grotty, rundown vibe, is I'm just going to use a little bit of Mod Podge. This is, I think, one of the best ways of making kind of moss and things like that. And then this, I can't remember where I got it from, somewhere on eBay, but it's just Scenic Scatterflock, and this is just called Moss Green. You don't need loads. Mix that up with the Mod Podge. Kind of looks like a sludge. There you go. And then you just start to paint this where you think you might get moss. So in kind of the corners, and start to move it around. Looks weird at the minute, but once it's dry, then just kind of in crevices. The rocks, just kind of work it in between the bricks. So it doesn't necessarily have to be moss that this is representing. It could be some sort of any kind of damp, fungusy growth, you know, algae or anything like that. Need to work a little bit more, I realised, on the foreground. It's looking a bit boring. Kind of worked a lot there, but didn't put too much on the foreground. So that's something I'll need to bear in mind when I do the whole thing. Then once this is dry in the morning, before I do the final edit, what I will do is have a look at what it looks like with the light. I'm going to connect this to a 9-volt battery just so we can see how bright it gets. The new lamps should arrive tomorrow. So I'm going to carry on sticking this on, and then we'll have a look what it finishes like in the morning when it's dry. Okay, I think these are pretty much done. I'm really pleased, should I say, with how this one has turned out, the sewer one. I think that looks really cool, really grimy. I'm not sure if the moss is a little bit bright, maybe, looks a little bit healthy for being down in a sewer, but we'll see what that looks like. Maybe I'll put some, I could always go over it with some dark inks or something like that and just kind of tone it down slightly. I think the big bits being painted like this will look really cool. I think it'll give it a really nice, bright, kind of white city look when it's finished. And then again, I can add things like the moss to it. I can go in and once it's all stuck together and add the grime and all of that kind of thing. I know now what colour scheme I want for this. I think going with the ivory and then with the white over the top is the way to go. And I think once I start adding in these kind of bronze, rusty kind of metal pieces in there and things like that, it will look really cool. So I'm really looking forward to that. What I'm going to do over the next few weeks is I will just slowly start painting those big bits up and getting the base coats onto the sewer bits. Might not be a huge amount of that in the videos because it's just kind of teach the same thing over and over again, so I'm just going to do that in the evenings over the next few weeks. Instead, next week for definite, I'm going to look at something slightly different. Me and my cousin, who you might remember from the Mordheim Battle Report, I'll put a link up here, have released a game book based on the Merkborg kind of thing. If you like Forbidden Psalm, things like that, it's kind of in that similar vein. So we're taking that down to Dragon Meet at the end of November in London, and what I want to do is put together like a display box for the book to go on the stand, and I think that will be a really cool kind of diorama. So I'm going to have a look at building that over the next week so that it's ready for when we go down in November. I'll keep up to date with all this kind of stuff as well and see how we're getting on. But it might be a slight shift for next week, and then we'll come back to this the week after and do a little bit more work on this the week after next. Thanks for watching again. You know, hit that subscribe button, subscribe, do all of that kind of stuff. We've had a lot more comments doing the videos this way, so that's really cool, getting people's feedback. Hopefully that will carry on. If you have any ideas, if you have any kind of tips or any suggestions, just drop them in the comments. I try and reply to all of them. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.